This episode of Your Morning Drive is brought to you by Fireworks Co-working. They are a creative co-working space located in Marietta, Georgia, focused on supporting the local community and uplifting creative entrepreneurs. If you want to try out this beautiful space, this podcast room is just one of the many available rooms and spaces available for you and your company to work at. If you want to try them, you can. Use code DRIVE at checkout and you'll get a free day pass. So, if you're working from home, if you're working at an office that you don't have to go to, if you're tired of working at your kitchen table where you have to listen to your kids or your spouse or the lawn people in the outside cutting the grass and it's too loud for your Zoom meetings. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You can try out Fireworks Co-working in Marietta, Georgia. It's right down the street from Kennestone Hospital. They are the presenting sponsor of Your Morning Drive. They offer me a beautiful space for me to be able to record my podcast with all of the creators, business owners, and other individuals that I get the pleasure of interviewing, and they can be your home too. So either go to the space, tour the place with the staff, tell them Logan Lewis from Your Morning Drive sent you, or if you're booking online, again, use code DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, for a free day pass to try the space. Your Morning Drive is also present to us by Good Days Canned Cocktails. Good Days are a classic cocktail brand created in a convenient, ready-to-drink canned format for any occasion, whether it's a pool day, a boat day, a beach day, a graduation, a wedding, a bar mitzvah, anything in between. Good Days are there for you. Good Days are ahead when they are in your cooler, your fridge, your anything in between. Good Days has your back. If you want to be one of the first to try their drink, you can do so by visiting drinkgooddays.com/pages/find-us to find a store near you selling their drink. Of course, you must be 21 years of age to consume and purchase. Guys, I want to tell you about another friend of my show, Your Light Marketing. If you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur trying to figure out how to stand out in a crowded market, I want to tell you about Your Light Marketing. These guys are all about helping you create a marketing strategy that's true to who you are without pushing you to follow trends or gimmicks that just don't feel right to you. They specialize in helping people build custom growth plans around their unique story and mission. So if you're tired of trying to be like everybody else and you want to attract the right customers, aka people who really resonate with what you're all about, then this is the team to talk to. Go to www.yourlightmarketing.com to book a free strategy session with them. Trust me, they will help you build a plan that feels authentic to you and gets results. Again, that's yourlightmarketing.com to book that free strategy session call with them. Your Light Marketing. Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Your Morning Drive. I am the host with the most, Logan Lewis. It is great to be back with you guys today. We're live from the Fireworks Studio in Marietta, Georgia. Before we get into our episode today, a couple of programming notes for you. Do me a favor and share this very episode, with at least one person in your life that needs to hear it, whether it's your friend, your neighbor, your parent, your sibling, your coworker, your ex-boyfriend, somebody in your life that needs to hear the show. You can listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and if you prefer to watch, you can do so on YouTube as well. Don't forget to subscribe on any of those three platforms, or all of them, whatever floats your boat. It would be greatly appreciated. If you prefer to watch, we're on YouTube, of course, so that link is at Your Morning Drive, similar to Apple and Spotify, at Your Morning Drive on everything. And that also transitions into social media. If you want to stay connected at Your Morning Drive on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Everything is, you guessed it, at Your Morning Drive to stay connected. There on those socials, you'll find show updates, episode announcements, and clips of the show episodes to keep you entertained. My guest today is a highly accomplished professional with a diverse background in emergency services, business development, and motivational speaking. A licensed Georgia EMT, intermediate, and HSI instructor, she made history as the first female fire chief in Cherokee County, Georgia, earning congressional recognition for her achievement. With over 20 years of experience in business development, training, and team building, she's also known for inspiring personal growth through her engaging presentations. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree, multiple FEMA certifications, and the prestigious Certified Protection Professional, CPP, credential. Her debut book, New Day Inspiration, a poetry journal releasing in December of 2024, offers words of hope through original poetry. Please welcome my new friend, Rebecca Strobl.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you for coming here. I'm truly honored to be sitting across from someone everybody listening just heard that. I'm not the only one that heard all of that. You have achieved so much, and it looks like such little time. So first of all, congratulations on all of that.
Thank you.
Where do you start? I'm just genuinely curious. Let's just dive right into the main act here, the book. So This book is launching. This episode is going to launch. We're recording this a little bit before Thanksgiving, but this episode will launch late December. Okay. So, the book will be out by then, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me about the book. Tell me what, put you in the place where you're like, you know what, I'm going to do the damn thing. And just tell me about the whole book journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I have a hard copy of the book right here. So it's going to be available online on December 3rd. But the picture that you see on the front of this book is one that I took.
Amazing.
In my community.
Where at?
Up in Lake Arrowhead.
Okay.
Yeah, in the northern part of Cherokee County.
Heck yeah.
And this book is full of 62 poems that are all original, no AI, folks, all out of my head.
Wow.
And all the photos, all original, ones that I took or somebody else took, no AI.
Wow.
And so basically the vision with the book was I have literally been writing poetry for 30 years. I wrote my first poem in 1993.
Wow.
And I've been writing poems, so they have been living in notebooks on scrap pieces of paper. And literally the very first poem I wrote was to get me through some hard times. And as I continued to write, it was to get through other hard times. But then I started writing poetry when I would talk to a friend or I would meet somebody and I would see they were going through something, or maybe they were celebrating some milestone in their life. I would think about them and I would write them a card just to encourage them, put a smile on their face. And literally I would think about them and then I would just start writing a poem. And
wow.
I would think of and the next thing you know, I would have a whole poem just for them. And so I did that for years. And
wow.
A lot of those poems I never even recorded. Like I literally would just write them a poem, close up the card and mail it and not really think about it again.
And then that was it.
And then some of them I kept. And with everything that's going on in our world, I thought, of course, I've been getting 30 years worth of feedback where people would tell me, I've saved all your cards. I've saved your poems. Like, you don't know what that meant to me, what it did for me.
That's incredible.
And I started getting all this feedback. And then it really hit me this year with everything going on in our world. I'm like, you know what? On a small scale, people have been receiving hope and encouragement. But I just really felt this year to get the tap on the shoulder that, you know what, the whole world needs this. So I need to stop hoarding it to myself and the couple people that I've written it to. So I hired an awesome virtual assistant who lives here in Cherokee County, Emily Crawford. Hey, Emily. Gave her all the scrap pieces of paper in the notebook. She put it into a Word document. And then I hired a legacy architect, basically a coach, literary coach. He'd worked in the publishing world for over 20 years out of Texas. And I'm like, okay, this is the vision. Help me. I don't know anything about writing a book. I've been in security, when you think of security guards and camera systems, and I've been a fire chief and EMT fighting fire. So I don't something about a book. So help. And these two ladies totally helped point me in the right direction, found an awesome publisher. So really the idea grew from just a poem, because I'm like, wait a second, I think you need to give people context. So then it evolved to, I'll have a poem and then I'll have a photo. If I have a photo of like what happened during my life, and then I'll do a memory, like what was happening. And then at the end, I'll come up with a life lesson.
Wow. And you have that for each poem.
Each poem. Yeah.
Wow.
And then some poems might not have a story, like a memory, because honestly, I didn't quite remember the exact details, but at least I knew what inspired it.
Sure.
And I have that. And then at the back, a good friend of mine, Chief Wanda Dunham, who actually gave me an endorsement.
Amazing.
In the book. She was the first African-American female to run the MARTA Police Department.
Wow, good for her. Shout out to her.
Yeah, amazing woman. So in her book that she wrote, Becoming Chief, at the end, she summarized all of her lessons. And I'm like, that's genius.
Right.
So that's what I did in mine. So at the end, in the epilogue, you have basically all the different lessons. And then throughout the book, I also ask a kind of questions, like to make people think about, okay, this is what I read. Like, okay, maybe that made me smile or maybe that helped me, but how can I use that to help somebody else? And I summarized all that. And then I thought about all my security colleagues, the last 20 years, because I've been in that industry since 2003. And I thought, okay, well, a lot of these guys, ex-FBI, military, law enforcement, they might not have had the same journey as I did that is a lot to do about faith to get me through, but I still want to inspire and uplift them and find a way to encourage them and help them have a better day. So I'm like, how can I structure this book? So I ended up writing a bunch more poems beyond what I already had. And so the way the book is broken out is it's in different categories. So at the beginning, I actually write a letter to my readers to say, hey, your journey may not look like mine as far as what's brought you to where you are, but let's celebrate those differences. And I'm just asking you to take a peek and find a section that works for you.
Wow, I love that so much. Can I see it?
Yeah.
Can I look at it? I want to see some of this in action.
Yes.
Oh, it's very good quality. Very, very nice quality.
Absolutely. Yep.
Hello, reader.
So there's like sections on there as far as places. I wrote a poem called Georgia. I wrote a poem called Texan. And then there's like life events like Mary or family.
I'm going to turn to a random page and I'm going to read the poem that's associated with that page.
Cool. That'll be awesome.
We're going to go right here. Friends.
Oh, cool.
There is a friend I know who did sink very low. He took the world's sins so that his future children might win. You ask, who could this be? Well, he is no stranger to me. This eternal friend has lived since the beginning of time. He made salvation mine. This eternal friend's name is Jesus, Prince of Peace. I was going to say this by like, he took the world's sins. I thought like, oh my God, what did he do? So that his future children might win. I was like, okay. And then when you said he is no stranger to me, I was like, oh, it's Jesus. That's good. That's really awesome, dude. This is really cool.
And then is there an inspiration with it or a memory?
There's an inspiration. So is this inspiration for this poem or is this inspiration for the friend?
The inspiration after the poem goes with that poem.
The inspiration says, friendship is a word that is often used and at times is misunderstood. Each of us has had a friendship that did not grow into the relationship we envisioned. It's true. It is easy to carry hurt in our hearts from these painful moments. This poem was written during Easter as I reflected on Christ's resurrection and how that truth has impacted my life. It reminded me that not only did I mean I could be forgiven of my sins, but that Christ is the eternal friend I can depend on consistently. Let this poem encourage you to lay the hurt at Christ's feet so that he can heal your heart and be the friend you always have wanted and needed. One that sticks closer to you than a brother or sister. That's really cool, dude. Yep. This is really cool. With the pictures, I mean, it's the little things like that just give it more context that makes it that much more meaningful.
Exactly.
And same thing with the inspirations or the lessons. I mean, the fact that you give context and it's it's what makes this different than just a rink-a-dink book of poems.
Exactly.
And was that a goal from the get-go?
Yes.
You didn't want this to just be another book of poems.
Like I literally, my vision was to make my book a card to the world. So like all these cards I've been writing people for the last several decades, I'm like, wouldn't it be awesome if I could do that on a bigger scale, like worldwide, and ultimately write a card to the world where they have that encouragement, where they can just, whatever they're going through, happy, sad, glad, they can just pick it up, go to a section and be encouraged.
You have a name of an author. Has anyone ever told you that? Strobl. It just sounds like an author's name. That's really cool. Did you ever envision, I mean, years and years past, did publishing a book ever sound like something that you ever had wanted to do? Well, or is this just something that evolved over time?
Well, actually, I have to give kudos to my sister.
Okay.
I only have one sister. She's 3 years younger than me. And when I was in college, after I graduated high school, I had a dream to do one thing and to go a certain place. And there was a lot of roadblocks. And there were poems that spawned from that time that are in the book. But I remember one year during that time, she actually found a picture of an old school typewriter with like all kinds of exotic animals on the keys, because I'm an animal lover, like elephants and tigers and all kinds of stuff. And then what she did is she wrote she framed it, and on the bottom, just like on construction paper, and on the bottom, she basically wrote that I had an amazing talent and that I was going to be a published author someday. And that, basically the world needed to have what I had to say.
Wow. I love that.
I, like all through college, all my moves, going all different places, like I always kept that with me. And even after I got married and I had it. So like literally from the time I had just shortly gotten out of high school, it's like she planted that seed, sort of in me, that like she saw that in me. And I thought, wow, okay. And then I met my husband and he encouraged me, you need to do it. And we talked about it. And then, like I said, I remember I was at a business club meeting, shout out to Canton Business Club. That's where I first met Emily Crawford. And I remember she was talking about she's a virtual assistant. And she's like, any tasks that you have that you just can't get done that are too overwhelming, that's what I do. And like literally in that moment, it was like, book. Like, maybe I can take the first step and like give her all this stuff and at least get it digital.
Yeah.
And like literally that was the start.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. And so I've been also curious about this also, just separated from the book, with the whole virtual assistant thing. So what, I'm sure they all have different rates and different, different ways that they do things. And so what, you just pay them hourly for what they do? And they have an hourly rate?
Yeah, like how she works is you can actually buy blocks of time.
Okay.
So you can buy like 20 hours, 40 hours, 80 hours.
Oh.
And then she's amazing. Like every week I get a report. Like, okay, of the 20 hours you bought from me, like this is how many hours I used this week. And there's no expiration. And basically it's up to you how often you want to use that time and how little you want to use that time. So
in theory, I could, hit her up tonight and say, I want 20 hours and then, not touch it for 6 months, but then finally say, hey, okay, I've got work for you.
Yeah.
Let's start that 20 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. She's genius. Actually, her story is another inspiration story. Is she worked in corporate America. She was an executive assistant for a large firm in Atlanta. And basically one day she got the notice that she was going to be downsized.
Okay.
And she was given some time before it actually happened. So this was sort of in her thoughts. So she was able to build everything out, like her website, think about her rates and all that.
Good for her.
So she had all that in place when she was finally let go.
Damn. I might need to talk to her.
Yeah, I was exactly.
Dang. Really cool. Emily Crawford, you said? Okay, cool, cool. So even rewinding from this, before we talk about New Day, before we talk about all of the things that you've done, let's rewind. I mean, so young you, well, let me make sure I get my timeline right. So did you go to college?
Yes.
You did? Well, duh. I said it in the intro. See, ADHD brain. Where'd you go?
Well, actually, that's an interesting journey. There's some poems in the book about that. Okay. But I went to a community college, and then I also went to Oral Roberts University.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful. And then after you get out of college, you've got your bachelor's. what's the immediate first move? While you're in school, what were you like, okay, when I get out of college, I'm doing this?
Well, my college journey was not the typical 4-year college journey. So when you think of most people, they go to their 4 years, what am I going to do? First step career. That was not me. I haven't fit the mold since I was like the 5-year-old version of myself. It's been an interesting journey, and that's probably why I've been able to accomplish so much, because I've always been on the other side. But basically, I actually didn't get my bachelor's degree. It took me almost 14 years to get it. So interesting story. So when I graduated high school, my dream, be a medical missionary, was going to become a nurse and go overseas.
So from the get-go, that is where your head was at right there.
Yeah, like 5-year-old version of myself. That's where I was at.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so amazing lady in my life, I called her my Granny Holbrook. She wasn't my grandma, but her and her husband had been medical missionaries. She was a nurse to Africa, and that's where she raised her son. And my dad, when I was little, he was a pastor of a church, and every Sunday we would go over to her house. She had raised her son there. Her husband passed away early on into their ministry, and she stayed in Africa for a long, long time because she loved the people. And then when her son got older and wanted to go to college, she moved back to the States. He did very well for himself, became a businessman, got a huge property, had a pool house, and that's where he had her living, was in the pool house. So we would go after church to the pool house and go visit Granny Holbrook. Okay. And in her wheelchair, because at this point she was way up in age, she would make us tea and cookies. But I can remember that lady. I told a story last night to some ladies. She would come up to me in her wheelchair and she'd grab my cheeks and she'd look me in the eye and she's like, God has big plans for you. You're going to do amazing things. Don't let anybody ever tell you different, and she really instilled in me from that young age about, it's not about you, it's about others. It's about serving others. It's like, that's where you find true reward, because we're all here for a purpose and we're here to do something to help others. And so I had that instilled in me when I was little. So back to going to college, I had heard that Oral Roberts University had a really, really good program for medical missionaries. And not only did they send teams all over the world to work in clinics and help people, but they also did a lot of work in Tulsa. So they worked at like the local health department, and they would go into different apartment complexes and do health clinics and help single moms. And I thought, well, again, I've always had a desire, and it had a lot to do with Granny Holbrook, because she was always top notch, even though she was in a wheelchair and in her 80s, you wouldn't know it. That house was immaculate. Oh yeah. And every time we come over for tea, everything was in its place.
I was going to say all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed.
That was her.
Yeah.
So from a young age, it was all about, if you're going to do something, go 100%, be the best,
Sure.
Find those resources to help make you the best. So I'm like, all right, well, they have this amazing program. That's where I need to go. But things sort of went sideways, and that wasn't exactly the vision that I saw, wasn't what the rest of my immediate circle saw when it came to family and friends. Going to Oklahoma was it might as well have been Africa. So it was whoa, again, whoa, I don't know, maybe we can just find that here. So that's the community college.
Sure.
But still that pull was more. Granny Holbrook, there's more for me.
Yeah.
So then some things happened, ended up in a car accident that miraculously healed, but then things opened up and I'm like, all right, well, now's my moment. I just need to go for it. So
was it a bad accident?
No, actually what happened, I was on my way to my grandma's funeral, my real grandma. And I had a Firebird at the time, and I was in the back seat trying to take a nap. And basically what happened is my head was against the door. My mom and sister got out, and my sister, not knowing my head was there, slammed the door in my head. And I ended up with a severe inner ear concussion.
Oh, good God.
That I didn't know that I had until a couple weeks later when all the symptoms started.
Yeah.
But so anyway, after that whole happened, and there's more details about that in the book,
sure.
I finally got the courage, you know what, I just need to go for it. So I went to ORU, started on my program there. I was going to go nursing, but then I thought, wait a second, if I want to serve overseas and do a clinic, why don't I just become a doctor? Then I can run the clinic, you know? So I was on that path, and then I ran into physics and organic chemistry, and that ended that. I'm like,
oh boy,
me being a doctor, that's not going to work.
Yep.
I got to come up with
I
plans,
can relate.
whatever I'm on right now. So then I met an awesome missions professor at Oral Roberts University, and he's like, well, why are you doing the whole medical thing anyway? And I'm like, why am I doing the whole medical part? I just want to serve people. I want to help people. And he's like, you know, you don't have to be anything medical to do that. Like, there's other ways you can help. And I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, why do you want to do it? I said, well, that's because I got to make money. And he's like, well, isn't the guy that like we talk about here on campus the one that when people had to pay taxes, he like reached in and brought out a fish and there was a coin in its mouth? And isn't he the one that like multiplied the loaves and the fishes when people were hungry, they were able to eat and then they had baskets left over? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, do you see where I'm going with this? So then I changed my major to missions. And so I was working on that. And then in that process, I ended up meeting my husband, and he was living in Michigan. So then I'm like, all right, so now I'm going to move there. And I only had like a year left of school. So here comes the interesting part.
Okay.
So I go back to Oral Roberts University, and I'm like, hey, I'm not going to be living on campus anymore. Oh, well, you can just live off campus. I'm like, try off campus like 3 states away.
Yeah. How about like 500 miles away? Or like 800 probably.
Right. So like, what can we do? And they're like, well, we created this school of lifelong education for missionaries that are overseas that want to get their bachelor's and their master's and their PhDs, but can't come to campus. And they just take classes, you know, remotely. And this was way back before computers and all the online platforms we have now, but they would send you your books. You would do all the assignments and you send it back. And I said, okay, that could work. Now, what do I do for a degree? Can I just finish out my missions degree with a minor in biology?
Yeah.
Because I had all this science.
Sure.
You know, from my community college days and when I was studying nursing, when I was on that path. Well, not really. And I'm like, well, what do you have that we can remotely use most of my credits on this multiple year journey I've already been on through a couple different schools? And they're like, well, we could give you a bachelor's degree in church administration.
In church administration.
Yes.
All right.
And I'm like, I really have no desire to be a pastor or run a church, right?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, but this is the only thing we can do to match your credits. And I'm like, okay, let's get a bachelor's of science in church administration. So
even that statement is just what do they call it? Is it like an oxymoron where I'm probably messing that up, but where it's like 2 statements that negate each other. A bachelor's of science,
right,
for church. It's like, what? That doesn't even make sense. But go on.
Yeah, but again, because I had all this science.
Yeah.
You know, when I was going to
Can't just let it go to waste.
Yeah, when I was going to the community college, I was in nursing school at one point. So I had taken all these science, all these nursing classes. And so that's what they came up in their magic bag as far as the degree they could give me with all that together.
I want to be a fly on the wall in the room for that conversation. It's like, well, we could put all these credits here and it could be that. And she maybe need to do 2 more years, or we could throw it all in this bin, but who's going to tell her that she's going to have to, what was it? Church administration. Right. Who's going to tell her that it's going to be a degree in nose goes, like, oh, come on.
But you're right. That must have been an interesting moment when they were looking at my
transcripts.
Oh, yeah. Community college.
It's like they import it in Excel and they're like, all right, Excel, what can we do here? And it's just like church administration. And you're like,
right.
Oh,
exactly. And then all the classes I had already taken there over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And so I continued to progress along that as I was working, you know, being married to my awesome husband. And then it got to the point where I had 1 class left. Well, for that degree, the kicker was I was supposed to do an internship at a church. That's church administration.
Sure.
And it was supposed to be a 3-month internship that I would just have to put in, I think it was something like 30 hours a week or something crazy. Well, at that point, I was working full time. And at that point, we had been living in Georgia, and I'm like, I don't have time. I can't afford to go and do a 3-month internship in a church and volunteer and like run a Sunday school class or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to make a living to help my family's financial future.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what you're going to need to get your degree. And I'm like, isn't there like a plan B or C or something we can work around? And they're like,
is it like do the internship or take 8 extra classes?
Yeah,
I'll take the 8 extra classes.
But it was do the internship and then write a senior paper based on your internship experience. And I'm like, well, I can write a paper, but I can't do an internship. So they're like, well, you're not going to get your degree. So literally, I just set it aside and it just laid there for years. And then it was so funny because I literally got another fly on the wall. My file got put in a program to where every so many years I would get a call from the new person that was assigned my case. And they would call me up and they would look at all my credits and they'd be like, you realize you're only 1 degree away from a bachelor's degree, one class away, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. And then you realize what it is? I'm like, yes, I have to do an internship at a church. And then I would explain the situation. I'm like, can't we like come up with something? Nope. You got to do the internship or else we're not going to give you the degree. And I'm like, okay, well, I get
okay. Well, well, this is my yearly, I'm not doing it. Have a good day. Talk to you guys next year.
I can't. So this went on for years and years and years. And like I said, we were getting almost to the 14 mark. And finally, I got reassigned to somebody else. And I got a new person over the theology department. And so this gal called me and I explained my situation. At that point, we were already living in Georgia and I had already been volunteering in our community's fire department.
Okay.
I was already a licensed EMT. I was a firefighter. At that point, I was the chief of my volunteer fire department, the first female fire chief. And so I started having this conversation with this gal and I'm like, look, I can't do an internship. Everything I do with the fire department is volunteer, but I work in the security industry, guards. I'm running a sales department. I can't just walk away from that and do this internship. I said, but let's just take a second and can we just step out of the normal box?
Right. Like, can we put our heads together and figure something out?
Right. Of this program. And I said, ultimately, what's the goal here? Oral Roberts University is supposed to be about, sending every person into every man's world. That's what Oral Roberts always talked about. If you go into the chapel, those words are up in the chapel, go into every man's world. So isn't that what we do at churches? We're supposed to be equipped to help people. I'm like, well, I am in this world. I have been in the security world for all these years, but now I'm in the fire and safety world. And let me talk about what I do to show compassion and mercy to not only people in emergencies, but my firefighters. So isn't there a internship
Can we make
here?
Yeah. Can we make a connection?
Yeah. Isn't there a story here? And so we had a long conversation and she's like, that's really interesting. And she's like, if you could send me an email, sort of what your thoughts are, like what you would do your paper on, what your thesis would be. She's like, I'll go ahead and send it up to the theology department. So she sent it on and I thought, well, started to get my
little hopeful,
bit, maybe this is it.
Yeah.
So she gave him my email address. I got an email back from him and he said, you know what, I approve it because I would love to read a paper that's not about somebody creating a Sunday school program or working in the nursery. And again, there's nothing, that's awesome. People do that.
Yeah, sure.
But he's like, I want to hear how you're taking this principle into every man's world and being a blessing in a world that I've never read about. I don't know anything about fire and emergency services. So he's like, yeah, these are the guidelines. That this is like what the course is. He took the catalog and he basically changed it to fit
Wow.
that world. And
shout out to that guy.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, write me a paper. So I did. I wrote my thesis. I wrote the paper, and then I actually wrote a manual for churches to be able to help their local fire departments and their local police departments.
So you still tied it back.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Yeah,
good for you.
Change the outcome of all these firefighters and police officers that lives are wrecked by alcoholism and drug addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder and all those things. Because my thoughts were, I'm like, okay, great, you all meet together on Sunday, but there's these people that around the corner that are working in a fire station or wearing a law enforcement uniform that are struggling, and they're not going to walk into your church. They're not going to ask for help. That's not what we do as public safety servants. We're the ones that when the life is in absolute chaos, we're the ones that have to stay calm and collected, and we have to solve the emergency and take care of you. We don't have the privilege of taking care of ourselves in that moment.
Sure.
But what ultimately that'll lead to if you don't have help is that it gets internalized and then all these issues happen. So my thoughts were, it's like you say you want to help the world and you want to help your community. Well, guess what? There's this huge need that's on the other side of your door. So here's someone from that world that is saying, hey, this is how you can help.
Wow.
Yeah. So needless to say, I got an A+ on the project.
And you got the damn degree after.
I got my degree.
After 14 years of people tossing your case back and forth like it was hot potato.
Yes.
It's almost like I picture when you're telling that part of the story, I'm picturing like at the yearly staff meeting, they're all like drawing names and it's like, who's going to get her case? And it's like, oh, Jeff got it this year. And Jeff was like, I'm going to make it work. And it happened. It happened. They made it work. So that's killer.
Yeah.
So let's rewind again. Because you, at some point during this journey of trying to get your education finished, you started working in public safety.
Yeah.
So what was that like? Your first day of your job in public safety, what was it? Where was it? What were you doing?
Well, also keep in mind that my job in public safety was 100% volunteer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was 100% volunteer. That was something I was doing while I was having the full-time career in security. And
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, I know.
So many things to juggle here.
Yeah.
You're killing it.
I'm not your normal guest, that's for sure.
No, okay. Well, then
Yeah,
screw. Forget the EMT stuff. Let's go back to that. So security. So, okay. So you're fighting the university on trying to get your degree and you say, screw it, I'm going to pursue security. How'd that work out?
Yeah, well, that wasn't the first path.
Okay.
That I got there another different way. So I married my husband.
Okay.
And
what's he do?
He's a chiropractor.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
He was in Michigan, where I went to the community college.
Okay.
And I had gone to nursing school, but then after that accident, I was in nursing school at the time, and I had to, withdraw. And then I'm like, you need to go to Oral Roberts University. We got married.
Okay.
And he's like, you know what? You need to finish nursing school.
Okay.
He's like, if that's something you want. And he goes, that's what you've been gearing for. And he's like, you need to go back, if nothing else, just to know that you can do this thing.
Right.
Because when you left because, you had this issue. Yes, you miraculously recovered, but you don't want that to be where you left that, And I'm like, okay, so I was able able to get myself back in the nursing program that I had to leave because of that. And that same dean of nursing, and she's like, oh, here you are. And I'm like, okay, I really want to do it. I'm going to do it. Here we go. So I jumped in. I was getting straight A's, got through my first semester. And then I realized that I'm all about emergency medicine, but when it comes to above the emergency room, I personally believe, and I have experienced, that there's other options and there's other ways of being healthy and staying well. And I found myself in situations where my personal values and beliefs didn't align with what I was being asked to do in that world. So I had a long conversation with my husband, and he's like, well, you know what? Hey, no worries. We'll just withdraw and we'll figure out what road you're supposed to be going on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I left having straight A's, and then what I'm going to do? Well, he went to school here at Life University.
Okay.
You know, here in Marietta.
Sure.
And when we first got married, that's all I heard about how amazing Georgia was and how incredible it was. And I'm like, okay, so then we set a plan to get back to Georgia. So I worked, after I got out of the nursing program, I worked at a marina as like an office manager. I was a substitute teacher for a while, all kinds of different things. And then things picked up and we finally came a plan to go to Georgia. And then we worked it out where I would go ahead and I talked to a couple staffing companies, and there was one Ronstadt that like, yeah, we can get you working instantly, like in office work. Like, what's your background? What's your skill set? Well,
how much time you got?
I'm a quick learner. So they're like, we have a couple ideas in mind. So he sent me on ahead. So I jumped in our one vehicle with a couple of suitcases, and that was it. And the goal was to start working at the staffing company, scope us out a home, a place to live, and all that. Well, he would sort of, transfer his caseload to another chiropractor and sort of wrap things up in Michigan.
Okay.
And so anyway, in that process, I ended up, one of my assignments was to go to Georgia Marble, which is a marble company that's north of Canton in Tate, Georgia. Okay. And to become an executive assistant to their VP of sales. Okay. I'm like, okay, that can't be too hard. No. So I started doing that a while. We moved down to Georgia, and then he was trying to figure out where he was going to set up office as a chiropractor. And that was going really well, just doing, clerical work. That my boss loved me, and I was on the plan that he was going to hire me to be a permanent employee. So I'm like, all right, no medical stuff, no missionary stuff. All right, whatever, just rolling with it.
Yeah, whatever the path is, I'm taking it.
Right. And at this point, the bachelor's degree was still on hold because, my case was in hot potato mode. So like, okay. Yeah.
You're just doing what you can with what you got.
Right. Exactly. So one day he was out on a sales call out west. And actually, let me back up. Before that, one day he comes in with all these marble samples to my desk, puts them in front of me with some brochures. And he says, and also he gave me an Excel sheet with our client list. And he goes, I want you to read these brochures, look at the samples, and figure out why our marble that's coming out of this ground is better and far superior than all Italian marble. I'm like, okay. And he goes, because my one sales rep passed away of cancer. The other one quit. And we're desperately low on mausoleums and tombstone sales. That's what they did. Okay. He's like, this is my our client list of funeral homes and memorial gardens. Oh, God. And I'm going to these places, and I need this many orders of tombstones and mausoleums from these clients. So figure out why we're better and give me some orders. So that was my sales training. And again, up to this point, nursing, when I was in Oklahoma, I worked as a certified nursing assistant in a nursing home. I was a candy striper at the largest ER in Tulsa. And
shout out to Oklahoma, by the way. I lived in Oklahoma for a period of time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that was my background, medical with a little bit of clerical. So
and then executive assistant, and then salesperson because somebody passed away and somebody quit. So it's your lucky day. You just got a promotion. Figure it out. Exactly.
And I remember sitting there like just saying a quick prayer. Okay. I get to learn something new. Help me out on this one. Yeah. So he challenged me. He's like, and I'm like,
God or your boss?
My boss.
Both, kind of.
Yeah, ultimately. But my boss gave me a challenge, and I'm like, well, how do I know it's better? And he goes, I'll prove it to you. He said, our founder, Mr. Tate, he passed away in the early 1900s. His tombstone is out in the Tate Cemetery. And he goes, if you take a wet cloth, go to the cemetery, go to his gravestone, wipe it off, the marble is going to have the same quality, resilience, and texture as the stuff that came out of the quarry today.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, you're on.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, if you're right, then I can sell that all day long.
Yeah.
I'm like, the guy's been dead since the early 1900s, and you're telling me that this stone is the same because the way, I believe the way God formed it in the ground all these thousands of years ago, if not millions. And so I'm like, okay. So on my lunch break, there I go, walking into the cemetery with my little rag, and I found his tombstone and I wiped it off, and the guy was right. And I was like, oh, it's on.
So you became the salesperson.
Right. And then next thing you know, he started getting complaints from the factory that they couldn't keep up with all the tombstone orders.
Oh my God, because you were just selling them like hotcakes.
Right.
Wow.
And
okay.
he's like, we can't keep up with these orders. So in that moment, a light clicked on, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm good at sales. Okay. Business was never in the equation, my equation, or growing up from my parents or the church or family friends. And I'm like, I'm a woman. Okay. You can't be in business. You're a woman. I'm like, well, God, all right, we're on a different path. So here we go. So started killing it and things were going great. And I was like 1 week away from being hired on permanently. And then while my boss was on a trip out in Arizona, they pull us, everybody from the office, they take us all out, the whole complex, stand us by the quarry. And then they announce that we've been bought out by another company and that they were closing the whole operation. They were going to shut down the mausoleum and the tombstone division of Georgia Marble.
Okay.
Sell it to a different company, but then they were going to keep the division that basically crushes the marble and makes calcium carbonate.
Okay.
Because they make wicked profit on that. So I called my boss after we got the announcement, and they told us that basically none of us would have a job, but they were going to let us go like different times, and they weren't going to tell us when. So basically they said, we want you to keep coming to work. And then one day we'll just tap you on the shoulder and say, oh, by the way, don't come back tomorrow.
Wow.
But we're not going to tell you when. We're not going to tell you how long, but just make sure you come back every day after this until whenever we decide that you're fired. So
Jesus.
So I called my boss on my lunch break, and he's in Arizona. I'm like, hey, we just got told this. Do I still have a job? Do you have a job? He goes, oh, no, that means I don't have a job either. And I'm like, well, are you going to get back home? And he's like, well, I'll have to call the executives and figure that out. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do? I was going to be hired permanently in a week.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I just would go back to the staffing agency and see what you can find. So I'm like, all right, here we go again. Reinvent whatever number I'm on at this point.
At this point, you're just spinning the wheel and you're like, what's it going to land on?
Right. So I'm in my late 20s and I'm like, so I started looking in the want ads and I found an ad for an inside sales rep for a security guard company.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I didn't know anything about marble. I didn't know anything about sales. And I figured it out by looking at some dead man's tomb. And reading some brochures. So, I mean, what the hey? Yeah. I mean, how hard could security be, you know?
Yeah.
So I interviewed, and the gentleman, it was so funny. He's looking at my resume and he's like, okay, so you're applying for an inside sales job to set appointments for managers, to ultimately for us to sell, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of contracts to get, security guards at different companies.
Sure.
And he's like, okay, so qualifications. You really don't have any sales experience. And I'm like, well, you're right, but I can sell you a tombstone. He's like, is that the only sales experience you have? And I said, yeah. And I said, but I can prove it to you. I'm like, make me sell you something. And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. So he gave me an ugly tie that he had hanging up in the wall that back in the day, the dress code was all the guys had to wear ties every day, during the week.
Sure.
And if you forgot your tie, you had to wear his ugly tie.
Okay.
So he's like, okay, you think you can sell me this tie? So I did. And then he's like, okay, that was a fluke. So then he pulls out a box of pencils from his desk and he puts it on his desk in front of me. He's like, sell me the pencils. And I sold him the pencils. Yeah. Cold. And so then he's like, okay, well, clearly there's some talent here.
How'd you sell the pencils?
Well, I basically just started talking about the texture and, writing them. And I'm like, okay, here, go ahead, write with that. Well, how do you get your pencils now? What does your current vendor do with them? Do they do any type of discount? What happens when you break pencils? How often do they replacement? Where are they made? How are they manufactured? What's their process? How much are you charged per pencil? What's their profit?
Damn, just hitting them. And he's like,
and again, no
sales experience,
no business degree.
Yeah.
I never read a book on business, marketing, profit, none of that in my entire life.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I just thought the whole time I was doing it, I thought if I was a business owner and I needed to buy this, like what kind of things would I be thinking about?
Sure.
And having worked at the marble company, it's like, what did I hear in conversation, people talking about? I just was always listening and things I picked up on. So that's what I went with. I'm like, I had nothing to lose,
Yeah.
So after that, he looked at my resume and he's like, wait a second, Oral Roberts University. He's like, what's this all about missions? And I had explained, what I was looking at. Turns out he wanted to become a pastor.
Okay.
And that was his real passion. So he had gotten into sales and he was in the security industry to provide for his family, but his real burning desire was to go into the ministry.
Sure.
So at the end of the interview, he's like, you know what? I'm going to take a chance on you for the sole reason of you don't have really any experience. But he's like, I like the fact that you went to Oral Roberts University and I like your charisma. He's like, for you to come in here and have very little credentials on a piece of paper, have no degree.
Yeah.
But you never back down.
Yeah.
And you're going for it.
Yeah, the resilience and the determination there is just
so
speaks for itself.
He's like, I'm going to take a chance. So here we go. Yeah. So that started my security career.
Wow.
And just quickly, because of him really mentoring me, I quickly went from a rep to a supervisor and then managing the department and the director. And I just kept on.
Wow. At the same company.
Yeah. At the same company. I was there for almost 13 years until they got restructured and I got laid off. Yep. And so then I had to reinvent.
Damn, 2 companies in a row, restructuring and laying off.
Yes.
Just can't catch a break. Yeah, it was 13 years in between, but
yeah.
Golly.
Yeah. So then I had to reinvent myself again.
All right.
Because
back to the drawing board.
I still didn't have a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
We're still in hot potato mode.
Okay.
So when I went to apply for like an inside sales manager, sales director job, everybody looked at my resume and they said, you don't know sales. Where's your business degree?
And you said, I was a vice president or a director or whatever at this company. I was, I led people. I led people that led people.
Right. It's like I led a team of 25. On average, we contributed anywhere from $7 to $10 million a year in revenue to the company's bottom line.
Yeah.
And the CEO loved what I was doing. Well, no, you don't. You don't have a bachelor's degree and you're not.
That is so funny about how it compares to today.
Yeah. And like, you're not even pursuing a bachelor's degree in business. This is a bachelor's of science. And what was the major? Church administration.
Yeah.
So they're like,
hard sell.
Yeah.
Sell that to them.
So they're like, you're not qualified.
Wow.
So at that point, I had already gone through EMT school through the county. I was in the fire department. They had an awesome program at the time for volunteers. If you would give up your nights and weekends for almost a year, the county fire department would put you through EMT school for free.
Wow.
So when I was running that sales team at the security guard company, I had an awesome boss who was retired from the Army, just really cool guy. He was the director of HR. And basically he let me work my schedule. And he's like, as long as your people are productive, I don't care how you use your vacation time, your sick time. And he's like, I'll let you work your schedule out. So literally for almost 2 years between fire school and EMT school, that's how I spent vacation days and personal days. And I would come in early in the morning and then I would leave early and go ride an ambulance to get my clinical hours. And he totally would cover me. If the CEO would want me in his office immediately for some kind of meeting, he would cover for me and he would call me and be like, hey, just to know, you might want to get here extra early tomorrow because he wants a report on such and such by this time. And I already got it started for you. Yeah.
Wow. Again, shout out to that guy.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I got laid off, I'm like, well, I have an EMT license. So while I was trying to get back into a sales manager role and having all these doors slammed in my face that you're not good enough, you're not qualified, even though I'd been doing the job, I'm like, well, let's drive an ambulance for 3 months just to keep the lights on. So when I drove the ambulance, I was based out of Roswell, and my territory is 400 and 285.
Okay. Oh, God.
Oh.
Jesus.
Yes.
God just keeps throwing those curveballs at you.
Yeah, so now I work for a non-emergency service. So most of the time I wasn't driving emergency. It was more just transporting people from place to place. But there were times when the main EMS service was overwhelmed and we would pick up emergency calls. So like I, for the most part, would work with a paramedic. And because I worked with a paramedic, I usually was the driver. And then that way, if the main system was overwhelmed, we would pick up emergency calls. But yeah, I had some interesting moments with them. But I can tell you that it definitely gave me extra motivation to go from a corporate sales manager job, running a sales team, to driving an ambulance. The pay was very different. So I had a lot of extra motivation to figure out, to your point, how am I going to sell myself? Like, how am I going to get around this obstacle? Because I don't want to be in the seat of the ambulance for the rest of my life.
Yeah, sure.
I liked what I was doing over there, inspiring, motivating my team, making a difference. Sure. Using that talent that I didn't even know I have. Yeah. So like, how can I get back there? You know, I'm grateful for the opportunity in the meantime, you know?
Yeah. Keep the lights on somehow.
Right. Yeah.
So then, okay, so you drive that ambulance for 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then, so where does the fire department come into play in all this?
So at that point, you know, we were already in the fire department. So how that happened is my husband and I, in the community we live in, one night back in 2007, we were at a place in town, the little town of Waleska, and we were just getting a bite to eat at a little restaurant they had there. It's long since gone out of business. And we met some volunteers that were part of the volunteer fire department.
Okay.
And the community that we live in, it has about, you know, anywhere from 65 to 70 miles of roads. Okay. And there's only 2 ways in and out. And there's 2 fire stations. One is staffed by Cherokee County firefighters, EMTs, paramedics 24/7. And then there was another fire station that the volunteers had all their equipment that was unmanned. Because basically when somebody would call 911 in the community, the county firefighters, EMTs, paramedics would respond out of that station to the emergency, and then any volunteers associated with the volunteer department would respond from their homes that were on site. The people that we met that night all lived around the fire station that was staffed by paid people from Cherokee County Fire. Well, they were located about 12 minutes from where me and my husband lived in the property. So that station that was staffed 24/7 was on the very northern part of the community. And then we were on the southern part of the community. And like I said, almost 70 miles of roads between the 2 gates, and minimum 12-minute response to get from one end to the other end. And so my husband and I started like doing math, and knowing him being a chiropractor, me having a medical background, I'm like, wait a second. So you're telling me if I call 911, it's going to be 12 minutes before anybody shows up? Mm-hmm. Maybe if they're driving fast among the hills and turns and ravines.
Yeah, maybe 10 or 9 minutes.
You know, and dodging deer.
Sure.
You know? Yeah. And other critters that might come out in the middle of the road. Maybe they can get that down a little less. Like you said, maybe even 7.
Maybe 10 minutes. Yeah.
Maybe even 7. I don't know. That would be depending on what part. But it's like none of that sounds like a good idea if like my husband's having a heart attack or
he might be dead in 12 minutes.
Right. Or let's say, like I said, by some miracle it's 7 and we're like, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. And we're like, you know, we have some experience, you know, we've never been in the fire service, but we looked at each other and we're like, you know, once again, it was the tap on the shoulder. I heard a long time ago from a preacher that everybody sits there, is like, oh, should I help? I don't know. I'm waiting for the signs. And he said, the need is the call. So in that moment, we're like, this is a significant need and we have talents. So my husband and I were like, well, let's get in the fire department.
So you and your husband did this?
Oh, yeah. So
oh, that's
we both
awesome.
Jumped in together.
Oh, that's incredible.
Because we're both like, we have some experience. So we got involved and, you know, we started going on calls and realized that there was a whole lot more we needed to learn. And the individuals that were in the fire department, they had been in it a while and they had come from a different perspective in that department. And the county was starting to move towards ultimately taking over the entire county and basically taking over what all the volunteer departments do to make it more of a true county provided EMS service. Instead of volunteers, you know, it was just sort of hodgepodge here and there when they could do it. And so we're like, hey, they're the professionals and I want to help people. Because I can remember when we first started, they gave us a t-shirt and, you know, very little training, very little medical training, because that's what most of the emergencies were. And I can remember going to people's houses and I'm wearing the t-shirt. So they're looking at me to do something.
Like, hey, buddy, help me. And you're like, I got to go to the bathroom. And
it's
then,
like, I know some things, but, you know, not emergency
like,
setting.
sorry, I'm new. The other guy, he's coming, though. Just hang in there.
Right. I'm like, okay, I know something from nursing, all right, not to, you know, and then on the fire and the, you know, motor vehicle collision and all those types of emergencies, I don't have a clue. And I remember just seeing people's faces. It's like, I was wearing a t-shirt. They were looking at me to help. And I can remember sometimes just being frozen and I'm like, this isn't cool. Like these people are counting on me to make a difference. So once again, back to Granny Holbrook, I'm like, I need to find a way to know what I'm doing and be excellent at it.
Sure.
Because somebody's life is on the line and somebody's counting on me.
Yeah.
So regardless of what the standard is within this department that I'm with or where people are at, I need to be at a higher level. And so that's why, you know, we started going to the paid fire station and, you know, having regular conversation with those guys and be like, hey, I know we're volunteers and, you know, I'm working a full-time job, but like, how can we get more training? You know, and they started working with us. And then when we went through, he went to fire school on his own, but we went through EMT school together to both get our basics. So we would go to class at night. And then like on the weekends, we'd go up to the fire station where the paid firefighters were and be like, okay, this is what we're learning in class today. You know, and him being a doctor, he knew, you know, the physiology and that part of it. But we'd be like, okay, on the emergency side, hey, like, how can we apply this knowledge? Like, can we practice our assessment? Can we practice this on you? You know, during an emergency, how can we use this knowledge to work with you? So that we can be a great team together and provide better service to our neighbors.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that just continued to evolve, and every opportunity that we had that we could learn, you know, we scooped up on it. And back to that awesome retired Army, you know, general. Again, he gave me the flexibility. So I would take vacation days and I would like go down to South Georgia and go through like fire classes or medical classes. We go to symposiums at Grady or Kennestone or something like that to better ourselves, you know, so that we can be better equipped. So yeah, that whole thing started because we saw a need and we thought we've been blessed with some knowledge and we don't have any kids. We have the time. So let's help. If we're on property and we're at our home and we're not, you know, I'm not commuting to Roswell and I'm back, let's help. So that's how we got involved.
Wow. And then you became the first female fire chief in Cherokee County. Uh-huh. Congratulations on that. That's amazing.
And again, that wasn't like a goal that I was like checking boxes on my security career. I had a like goal that I wanted to get to, but on the fire side, I just wanted to help.
Yeah.
And I had been promoted.
So I was going to, sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
So when you are is being promoted, who does that come from? Or is it something that you apply for to be the fire chief, or does somebody come to you and say you're the chief?
So how it worked in that department is we had a board of directors.
Okay.
that basically managed the organization because we were, nonprofit.
Because it's all volunteer based.
Right. It's all volunteers. So they managed the nonprofit organization that was our volunteer fire department. And then ultimately they were responsible for the funds. So the way it worked is the volunteer fire department had a fire chief that actually reported to the board of directors.
Okay.
And all of the firefighters, they all voted for who they wanted to be their fire chief. And then ultimately the board of directors is the one that finally
would like seal the deal. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. So they all voted for you.
Yeah.
That's killer.
And the crazy thing is before that, when I started going through all this training, I'm like, we need better training. We need to be better equipped to serve our neighbors and handle emergencies. So it was one of those things where they're like, okay, if you're so excited about training, then here, you're the lieutenant. That's what and they didn't have to have board approval for that position. They're like, fine, you're the lieutenant of training, train us. So that's what I started doing. My husband and I, he would help me out. And I came up with some crazy training and they started doing a lot of training. They're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is getting too much. So how the whole chief position came about is our volunteer fire chief at the time. Again, the county was continuing to work towards ultimately, running everything. And one night at training, he just walked out of the fire station and he's like, I'm done. I don't basically like the direction where things are going and I'm not going to do this anymore. And so all the firefighters were standing around in the fire station, including my husband, and the gentleman that had been there much longer than us, they're like, well, what are we going to do? Our fire chief just quit. And so literally I'm standing there, the only lady, and I raised my hand and I said, hey, I'm like, I feel that I could make a difference and I want to help. So I'll step up. I said, I'll be the fire chief. And they're like, yeah, but you're working a full-time security sales job. And I'm like, well, I'll find the time because we need to help. We've gotten our focus away from serving the community and made it all about ourselves and what's happening with the county fire department and what's our future is going to be. And I said, those are all the wrong questions. We have equipment that's in this building that people paid for, that we still are allowed to operate. We're still allowed to go on calls and to work with the county firefighters and paramedics. And people are counting on us. So I want to step up and get the focus back on that and see how we can help the community for whatever time that we have to do so. So, yeah. So they're all like, okay. So they all unanimously voted for me and they took it to the board and they're like, we want her as our chief. And so the board approved, and next thing you know, I have reporters from the county, our local newspapers coming out to our volunteer station and interviewing me. And they're like, you're the first female fire chief. And I'm like, I knew I was for that department, but I didn't know I was the first one in the county. And then the craziest thing was I got a letter from a congressman congratulating me on me being the first female fire chief in the county. And I was blown away because I'm like, I just raised my hand because I wanted to help, because I'm like, we're going this direction and we need to get it back about the people and making a difference. And what the hey, who needs sleep? Let's go for it.
Who needs sleep?
Who needs sleep?
Who needs sleep or recharge time or just time to myself? Who needs any of it? Let's just run it. Let's work 25 hours a day.
Yeah. So
wow.
Thank God for my husband, because when I was running the sales department in Roswell and he was on property, he would be running calls. Yep. Yeah. So
wow, you're a rock star, dude. You ever sit with somebody and you're like, I'm not even qualified to be here. Okay, so you go through all of that. I mean, ambulance driving, fire chief, getting your bachelor's finally, and then new day. You decide to quit it all, right? New Day's your full-time job.
Yes, it is now. Uh-huh.
You are an entrepreneur now.
Yes.
Which is crazy to me because you have a track record 3 times. Yes. One of them volunteer-based, but still, you rose to the top in a volunteer-based organization.
Yes.
You rose to the top at the security company.
Yes.
You rose to the top selling tombstones.
Right.
You have a proven track record that no matter what company you work for, you're probably going to end up in senior leadership and potentially, you know, I know it's not all about money, but make boatloads of money, have next to unlimited time off. And then you decide to go entrepreneur. Why?
Yeah. So with that is I had actually started my company on the side, and that the whole entrepreneurial, my own company, that was never a thought.
Okay.
Really cool story. So I actually had started my company under a different name back in 2017. That was in that transition time.
Okay.
When I was laid off from the first security company.
Okay.
I was actually working at a staffing company. That same staffing company
Randstad?
that got me at the marble company, Randstad. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I was working for them in their industrial division, trying to staff welder positions, warehouse workers, forklift drivers.
Wow.
So I was going to warehouses. I was going to like heating and plumbing firms and welding firms and those kind of places over in Cumming. So I was at a company trying to sell him our staffing services to get him warehouse workers and like project managers. So I'm in this meeting with this gentleman, old crusty construction dude, you know,
sure.
Tells it like it is. And so I gave my pitch, and I hadn't been with them that long. And he tells me that, well, I'm not going to use your company because they suck. You can't find what we're looking for. It's not going to happen. And I'm like, oh, well, this is going to be a short conversation, because I'm not the type of person that's going to sit there and just tell them stuff from the air to make a sale.
If they're not interested, they're not interested.
Right. And more importantly, if I truly feel in my heart of hearts that we're not the best match, I'm not going to push it.
Right.
Because I want to operate at a higher level, and I want to be able to look myself in the mirror. Right. And in that moment, I'm like, he probably has a point. We're probably not the best match.
Sure.
I know other people, even in the short amount of time I had been in the staffing industry, I knew of other people that would probably be more suited. So I'm like, okay. So then we start talking about OSHA. Somehow he brought that up, and about all the regulations that they have to have CPR training, bloodborne pathogens, first aid, those kind of things. And then I had talked about at that point, was fire chief of my volunteer department, and I was doing all these classes in the community. So I was teaching CPR classes, and I was doing all this training for my firefighters, and word had gotten around to my county and surrounding counties, and other firefighters and EMS people, public safety people were crashing my fire station to join my trainings, because they're like, we love your live-based scenario, like crazy trainings that really push us to the next level to make the knowledge come alive. So he starts talking about OSHA, and then I start getting all excited about the training I'm doing for my firefighters. And so then he stops and he said, well, you know, we use a company to do all this training that we're required to do. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, you know, you could do that. I'm like, okay. And he goes, actually, I want you to train my people. The people we use suck. I don't want to use them. I want to use you. I'm like, he's like, are you a company? I'm like, no, I'm not a company. Remember, I'm supposed to be here selling you a staffing contract.
Yeah. I'm here on behalf of somebody else right now.
Right. I'm like, I just do all this as a volunteer to help my community. He's like, well, I need help. I'm like, okay. He's like, I want you to do it. And I'm like, well, I guess I could, but I can't do it during the week. Yeah. I don't want to, compromise with my employer.
Sure.
And he goes, well, I'll pay people overtime to come in on a Saturday. I'm like,
wow.
Okay. And he goes, okay, guess what? I want you to do on this date. And by this date, you need to be registered with the state of Georgia as a corporation. You need to have your tax ID number, and I'm using you.
Wow.
Yeah. So
holy shit.
So I formed a company because he's like, I can't pay you unless you're a company. Our payroll, our accounting department won't be able to write a check. Won't write a check. I'm like, all right. So again, nothing about entrepreneurship, having a business. Again, no business degree. I'm like, hey, all right. Well, I'm like, isn't this like 75% of the battle? Don't know much about business, but when somebody wants your services that you didn't even know you have, that's pretty darn good. So I started my company, and I would just like continue to do his training cycle every couple of years for his people. And then friends of ours that work at a church that was one of my husband's patients.
Okay.
She ran like the Sunday school department, and she's like, well, our people need to have CPR training. And she's like, you should do our training too. I'm like, okay, can you do it on a Saturday? Because I'm not available during the week. She's like, sure. So they became client number 2. And, you know, they just...
And you get home that night and you're like, okay, this could be something.
So I did them a little bit. And then I, you know, was kept on climbing up in my professional career in security. And then last April, I basically reinvented myself to come up with a current company. And it was sort of like, okay, the accountant, she's like, okay, you know, you're getting to a place where, you know, that's great you're doing it on the side, but eventually you're like going to have to decide, like, is this going to...
One of these has to go.
Like, is this going to stay small, or is this going to go? And I'm like, okay, well, you know, I kept thinking about it. And then this year, so that was April 2022 that the current name came to be. And then this year I was working for another security company. And to your point, I had got to the director level. I was doing very well with all my commissions and kicking it, rose to the top. But it got to a point where, like, I didn't have the autonomy and the freedom to take care of my clients the way I thought they should be taken care of. And out of a quest for profit, there were certain things that were starting to get overlooked. And I was being asked to tell people certain things that I knew weren't 100% of how we were going to be able to take care of their needs. And just sort of like when I was in that nursing process and nursing school, it became more and more of like that internal conflict of, you know, this really isn't aligning with my beliefs and my values. Oh yeah, the money's great, most I've ever made in my life. But I'm like, there's a higher thing here, you know?
Sure.
And then also there wasn't a lot of appreciation. Like, I was killing it and nobody really seemed to care. You know, they didn't think that it really mattered, or like I was doing it. And I'm like, there has to be, I've come through so much. I'm like, I don't know. So I'm like, you know, I made myself a goal. I want to be a vice president in 5 years. And it was like the year 4 mark, and I was a director. So I talked to another colleague of mine who had her own security company, much smaller than the one I was at, but she was more event staffing.
Okay.
And she decided she would give me a chance and hire me as her vice president. So I walked away from that job, and she's like, now this is event. Okay, these are events. This isn't permanent security where you just, you know, sign a contract for 1 to 5 years. This is
Jelly Rolls coming to town, and we need... We need 50 security guards for the perimeter of the concert.
Right.
Okay.
So it's not going to be as structured. So it's going to be real different from where you came from. But I see you are very talented, and I would like to get into the permanent world. So maybe I could bring you in as my VP of operations, and you could help me build that. So I left that other company, joined her company. And about a month in, I'm like, okay, now I understand what she was trying to warn me. This isn't for me. Definitely not for me, because I was, you know, trying to help write policy, but then I was also working the events, and she was right. The event thing, that was not my deal. So then I'm like, oh my goodness, what did I just do? You know, I left that amazing career, all this money, not fulfilled. And then I created a position. I got this gal to take a chance on me and hire me as a vice president. And then I'm like, and then I resigned because I'm like, this isn't for me. So all last summer, I'm like, I'm just going to get back on the hamster wheel. I'll just get another sales position, get a director position, and just keep on it. While this was still going in the background on the side with those handful of clients that have been loyal to me, you know, some of them from when it was the other company. And then I had picked up a bunch more in April of 2022 because a good friend of mine in public safety had referred me to one of my best clients now, the Roof Depot. So they picked me up last year. And so I had this going. And then one of my good colleagues that back at that first security company, I had supplied sales reps for his territory. And that man, for the last 20 years, Keith Oranger, he had literally for 20 years, he's been checking on me, calling me every quarter.
Wow.
Asking how I was doing, where I was at now, what was going on with my career, asked how my husband was. And he's very successful. He's out of New York. He started a couple of companies, and, you know, he completely started on his own. I mean, his dad was one of the founding people of that security company that sold for, you know, well over $1 billion to another global company. So very, very intelligent man, phenomenal businessman. And I remember last August, he called me for one of the, you know, hey, how you're doing? And I told him what had been happening that year. And he's like, you know, and I told him how I had New Day Education and Motivation, but it was a side thing. And he's just like, how old are you? And I told him, and he goes, he's like, why don't you just go for it? I'm like, what do you mean? He said, you know what? You're at a point that if you know, you're going to get to a point in a handful of years where it's going to be too late and too difficult to just go for it. He said, you've spent 20 years building all these relationships in these two major sectors and always doing the right thing. He's like, people have noticed that and people know you. And he goes, and you spent it doing all these sales. He's like, so why don't you just go for it? Take that, put it into your own company and make it the full-time deal. He said, all of us in our industry, in the security industry, will have more respect for you for having the guts just to go for it. And if it doesn't work, which he's like, I don't think that's going to be the case for you. But if it doesn't work, we'll still have more respect because you had the guts to go for it.
Yeah.
Instead of just, you know, staying put and, you know, hoping. So he connected me with his marketing person who did my business card, E5 Marketing out of New York City. She did my website. And
very nice website, by the way.
Yes.
Fantastic
Harriet
website.
Donnelly, E5 Marketing. She's amazing. But I remember he's like, I'll hook you up. And I'm like, okay, so, oh boy, here we go. I'm jumping off another cliff. I'm going to do this full time. So I'm not going to try to get back on a hamster wheel. I'm going to take all that sales experience and, you know, grow my company. And I remember she called me like within minutes of talking to him. And, okay, so you're my new client. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how this is going to work. I'm not the same level as Keith. And she's like, well, I got you, babe. We'll work it out. And she's like, yeah. She's like, you're a friend of Keith's. You're a friend of mine. You
amazing.
Know? Yeah, absolutely amazing. And, you know.
And you've been killing it ever since.
Yeah. So it's definitely been a process, you know, and now after a year, all those seeds where it was really tough and had to do some tough things, you know, and sort of put myself out there. But now all those seeds are starting to go, you know, because I'm like times over the last year where it was like, mm-hmm. You know, but I thought I've come too far.
Yeah.
And it's like at this point, like people are counting on me. It's like they're counting on me to be an inspiration. Like if she did it, then I can do it.
Yeah.
So like what else can I do? And
that's all I'm thinking right now.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. I mean, do you think there's any chance you go back to not working for yourself?
I don't think so. No, my vision is to keep on it, to find a way.
To do what Granny Holbrook said. Yep. You're going to give it 110%.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, find a way.
In fact, while you were talking about something earlier, I was looking at your website and I noticed that this is just the beginning.
Yes.
Which I'm intrigued to hear about as well. I mean, so for those who don't know the context, on her website, there's a section that's about the author. And if you scroll down about halfway through the page, there's a New Day book series. And this is the first book, A Poetry Journey, which is notated on the cover. But then it says there's a second book going to be called New Day Inspirations, A Motivation Journey. And then third one, A Leadership Journey. Fourth, A Faith Journey. And then the fifth, an autobiography. I mean, you're a damn rock star, dude. This is so cool. I'm very inspired. Which, I mean, it's what you do.
Yes,
so
that's my mission.
I'm honored that I got that for free. But golly, man, I mean, it's just incredible. You've got to be so proud of yourself. Your husband, what? He's the real unsung hero here.
Yes, absolutely. I picture 1,000%.
After talking about you going from this company to that company to this company, I just picture like you getting home from, like it's a sitcom, like you getting home from work one night and you're like, honey, I quit again, but this time it's real. And then 2 months later, honey, I got let go again, but this time we're going to do the damn thing. And then repeat. And then finally we land on New Day, and that is your baby. And God, it's inspiring. So you love writing, though. I mean, like you figured that out. Of course, you love to write poetry, but I mean, in doing this whole process, you realize like, oh, being an author is awesome. Like I love this whole process. So much so that I assume, unless you're giving yourself a little break, are you already working on book 2?
Yeah, because actually the reason why I started with the poetry journey for the book 1, and then the second one is going to be a motivational journey, because I already had it in hand. And that's something else that I've learned, that I'm always, when I'm up against a wall and it seems completely impossible and there's no earthly way that it's going to happen. And like, that's the moment that everybody else would be like, okay, just get run over by the Mack truck. You had a good fight, you tried, but it's over. In those moments, I take a second before here comes the Mack truck to squish me to a pancake. And I think, what do I have in my hand? Like, there has to be something. What do I have in my hand? And so with the poetry journey, I'm like, I have poems that I've already written. With the motivational journey, cool story. So during that transition time when I got let go from that security company and everybody else was like, oh, I don't want to take a chance on you. You don't have the paperwork to say you know what you're doing. I got a tax and accounting company to take a chance, and they hired me to lead their sales team. And it was like a big call center type of environment where there's like 100 people all on one floor, and there's all these different sales teams. Most of them were account managers, sort of like what you do in your day full-time job. And then there was these 2 new sales teams. So the one new sales teams, they were looking for a manager because their performance was in the toilet. Absolute, just crashed. And a couple of these ladies that were on the team, they had been mega producers, but they stopped producing. So they hired me, and they're like, oh, stop producing, deal with them, because they don't produce you. I mean, they had written these people off, like,
wow,
me. And I remember my first meeting with them as their new manager. And again, I was coming to here's another industry I get to learn. I didn't know anything about, nothing, sip silch. I remember I had them in the conference room and I met with them, and that's the first thing I said. Okay, I'm like, okay, you probably looked at my resume. You're right. I have no clue about your industry. Never worked in it. Don't know anything about, software. But I was looking over your personnel files. And what I do know is that some of you have been in this industry a long time, and that you have produced, and that you do know the industry, and you know your clients, and you know how to sell it. So my expertise has been, at the time I was already in the fire service, my expertise is working with teams and figuring out that's your talent. And my job is just to be the person in the hot air balloon that's giving you the hot air. That's my role, is to make you successful. You know your craft. So that's all I want to do. Figure out where the obstacles are, why you can't be successful right now. Let's blow them out of the water if I can. I don't know the hierarchy here and the politics, but if I have the ability to remove the obstacle for you, by God, I'm going to kill myself to do it so you can be successful. I said, and personally, I say that you all are winners. And my job is, let's prove everybody out there on that floor dead but wrong. And prove to them that you are the superstars, you are the champions, and you're far more capable than they even can imagine. So let's go. So to that end, every day I'm like, okay, how am I going to keep this going? How am I going to motivate them? Because they're like so discouraged and like nobody believes in them. And I'm like, baloney. They needed cheerleaders. So I would get to work every morning early in our little cubicle. And I purposely took the cubicle at the end so they would have to walk by my cubicle to get to theirs. And every morning I would think of a quote for them to inspire them, to motivate them. And so when they would come into work every morning, they would walk by my cubicle and see a new quote hanging there. And like days that I would take vacation, I would have them take turns. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to be out of the office for like these 3 days. All right, you have to come up with a quote. You need to motivate your team members, and then what started happening is other people on the floor is they weren't even part of my team, but like they might be on the other side of the room and they would like come into work and they would like walk past my desk
to see the quotes.
Right. Exactly.
Wow.
So I saved all of those quotes. Again, I have them all in folders. And so my plan is the next book there'll be a quote for every day of the year.
Wow.
And I'm already at least 50% there. Now, some of them I'm going to have to tweak a little bit. It was hilarious, especially I've looked through that file when I was writing this and some of the quotes when I was out of the office that my people came up with. I'm like, okay, that's probably not going to make the book, but like one of them I saved. They did when I was out of town, and it said, and I would like draw a little artwork around the sides of the quote, to make it stand out.
Yeah, sure. And so,
one of my employees' quote for everybody when I was out of the office was, "Do your job again."
It's valid. Wow. Wow. This is crazy. You're crazy, but in the best way possible. In the best way possible. It's so inspiring. I can't wait to just read every inch of your website later. Just every inch, because it's so good.
And both of them now at this point, thanks to Harriet over at E5 Marketing, I have my book website and now I have my company website.
Oh, God. You're killing it, girl. If you see this, keep doing what you're doing. And call me because I want some tips, because I also do websites. Yeah. And from one website person to another, your websites are badass. Wow, what a career you've had. Mm-hmm. And we're only like halfway there.
Exactly.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
What else is there anything, I know, so now you're an author now. Mm-hmm. Is there a box is there an industry that you haven't checked off the list that you'd love to? Or are you really, all in right now on New Day, on the books, on your clients that you serve? Or do you have other things in the years to come?
I would say that, right now I'm all into this. The only other thing that I would add is I definitely would like to grow like the motivation and the speaking part of my business, just because I want to inspire and encourage people. Like I was that person that clearly, as we've been having this conversation, I was that person that had like all these ideas and all this fire and zest. And I was told that like, okay, no, this is like your box and sort of this is where you need to be. And this is what's normal. And like, I just felt like I had so much more in me to give and to serve, and it didn't quite fit. And I know what it was like to have a couple people that I'm super grateful for that were there to be like, no, you're so much more. But I also know how lonely of a road that is when you're going on this path, but you're like, but I think there's more, but I'm not too sure, or I'm having a really hard time and I don't know what to do. I know what that feels like. And I want to do everything in my power to get people out of that and to give them hope. Because I know what it did for me when I was given hope in some pretty bad situations. That's part of that's in this book. Yeah. And even on the fire and EMS side, I can think of going on emergencies and seeing people dealing with stuff and being like, wow, this is a bad situation, but I get to be here and try to make their bad day a little bit better. Right. So that's my desire for the speaking part, just to be able to reach more people and help more people and inspire them. Wow.
Well, you've certainly inspired me sitting here. It's crazy. This is like one of those conversations after all of my episodes, I get real excited and happy and motivated and everything. But every once in a while I do one and I'm like I just want to go punch a hole through the wall. Like I just want to run through that door right now and just like, God, it's super cool. It's super cool. Rebecca, there comes a point in every conversation that I have where I ask each guest a collection of questions that is the same for everybody. Okay. I ask them all the same questions, and we just got to know you on a professional, a little bit spiritual. We got to know you on a good level here, but let's take it back and let's get to know everyday Rebecca.
Yeah.
So these questions are they're very first date like questions. There's a couple deep ones in there, but for the most part, they're just very fun. Hey guys, I want to talk to you a little bit about the company that makes your morning drive happen every week. Are you looking to elevate your business and your brand? Hammerhead Creations is here to help. They offer top-tier marketing services, including social media management, website design, and Google page optimization, ensuring your business reaches the right audience. Whether it's a side hustle or your full-time grind, their expert team, me, is ready to help you grow. Plus, if you're into podcasting like me, Hammerhead Creations offers full support for both in-house shows and external podcast creation. From concept to production, we will help you bring your ideas to life. Visit www.hammerheadcreations.com and discover how we can take your business or your podcast or both to the next level. Hammerhead Creations, swim with the big sharks. So what's your favorite movie?
I love It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, it's a good question. It's a good one.
I love that movie. Yeah. You know, because
I'm not surprised.
Because here he was making an impact and he had no clue.
Yeah.
You know, he just thought that like, oh, I haven't done anything, you know, I'm just plugging along. But it's like, no, you did make an impact.
They need to make a movie about your damn life.
Well, that's what it might be in the future, hopefully.
I mean, God, I can picture it. I mean, call it Strobl. It's got legs. I'll direct it. Yeah. I'd love to direct a movie. I'll direct it. You know, I just learned the whole story. I already got the script. I just need to fill a couple things in, and we've got the script.
Yeah.
I learned about all kinds of your professional jobs after and during college. But what was your first ever job?
McDonald's. Cashier.
Hell yeah.
16 years old.
Wow.
And literally, I got the application before I turned 16.
Wow.
And the day I turned 16, I marched myself to the McDonald's and I turned in my application.
I love McDonald's. I have no shame. Don't ruin it for me. Do you have secrets that you're not supposed to tell me? Did they make you sign an NDA and you can't reveal that their nuggets aren't actually nuggets and they're just that sludge that people say that they are?
I'm not going to respond.
Okay. Rank these three things in order of your favorite to your least favorite. We got salsa, guac, and queso.
I say queso would be number one, even though it's really bad for me.
Sure.
And then salsa and then guac.
That is my answer as well. So I like that. Rebecca, if we found out tomorrow was your last day on Earth, tonight, what would your last meal be?
Oh, man, it would probably be like a Greek salad.
Okay.
And it would be buttered chicken curry, basmati rice, and naan bread.
All right.
Yeah.
Feast of Champions.
Yeah, with some nice cup of hot green tea and some organic honey. And then for dessert, a nice, organic dark chocolate bar with like cherries and almonds in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it for the most part, except for the almonds. Can't have those. But that sounds delightful. Wow, you just sold me. All this food talk, man, it's the worst, but it's the best. You get to organize yourself a music festival. Who are your three headliners? They can be alive or dead. You're essentially putting on a festival for yourself.
Okay. I would like the Newsboys, not the current Newsboys, but the Newsboys before the current ones.
Okay.
That would be number one. There's another, they're like a quartet group.
Okay.
I listen to them all the time. trying to think of their name. They're like on my favorite playlist when I pull up YouTube. But anyway, those guys out of Ohio.
They know who they are.
They know who they are. The Redeemed Quartet.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's who they are. I
Okay.
really like their stuff. And who's number 3? I don't know. I'd have to think about number 3 because those are the two that
Our main on repeat the most.
Oh, I'd say the third on a totally different note. Like I find the best a symphony.
Okay.
Orchestra group in the world and have them do a concert
That
because
sounds awesome.
I adore classical music because I played piano from the time I was really, really, really tiny until I was probably about 10 or 11. And then after that, I played the clarinet through high school and in college until I had to get rid of my clarinet. So, because my husband wasn't a big fan, but it was pretty cool. What I did with my clarinet, though, as hard it was to say goodbye to an old friend, is I found a music shop in my county that would take used instruments and then they would reach out to the local schools, like the local middle schools, and kids that wanted to be in band, but their parents couldn't afford to get them an instrument. They would completely, fix and repair and like replenish.
Yeah, sanitize
instrument.
everything.
Yeah, and basically repair all the pieces so it was brand new and give it to the kids for free.
That's awesome.
So that's where my clarinet went.
Hell yeah.
It lived a second life.
Yes, it did.
Helping a middle schooler.
Yes, it did.
So with that being said, I love classical music. I love to listen to it and like hear all the different instruments and it just, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. On a day that you are not writing or speaking or motivating or teaching, on a day that, let's say, husband's off doing his own thing too, you get a day to yourself, a self-care day.
Oh.
What does that look like for you? How do you take care of yourself?
Well, I'll start the day with a nice long walk in the woods. Before I do the walk, I'll do a bunch of stretching. I'll have like a protein shake, I'll do my stretching, and then I'll go for a long walk in the woods. I'll come back, sip on the back deck with a nice cup of green tea, read a little bit, and then probably call some people that I haven't talked to in a while and be like, hey, how are you doing? I'm thinking about you.
I love that.
If it's in the summertime, go for a swim.
I love that. I love that a lot. What does success look like to you?
Success, and it's interesting you asked that because I was asked that on another podcast.
Really?
Yeah, and actually it's if you go on my website on the media page, and that's where once you send me the link, this is where this is going to go.
Okay.
But on that media page, I got to be on a podcast with it. It's really cool. 2 moms started a podcast for their kids.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so they started this whole business for kids to learn how to be entrepreneurs. And so the kids completely run the whole podcast.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so they interviewed me. There's a picture of me on that page with them. So cool. But they asked me that question. And for me, success is, I believe, every single human on the planet has talents and we have abilities. And so to me, success is figuring out what those are and using them to help other people. Because I believe that when we're using the talents and skills we've been given, everything else is going to come into line. But that's true success, when we can use those talents and we can make our world a better place.
I like that a lot. That's a great answer. What's something that very little people know about you?
Very little people know about me. That I survived a hurricane in a tent.
At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me that you were on a walk in a woods and a lion came out of nowhere, attacked you, you broke a branch off of a tree and was able to get the lion on its back and choke it out. Golly. You know what? I don't even want to know. We're just going to leave it at that.
Okay.
We're just going to leave it at that.
Okay.
And I'll have you tell me that story next time.
Okay.
Oh my God. In a tent. Oh my! I could just see you too, just like just holding it down, literally holding it down. What triggers you?
When you say triggers, like explain.
Like what really gets you going? You seem like a very positive person, but what's the one thing that when you see it happen or when you read about it or see it on social media, or, you know, or if it happens to you personally, what do you just like, God, that is where I draw the line. I just can't stand that.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. I thought that's a really good question. What I absolutely can't stand. I think that one of the biggest things I can't stand is that when people don't value other people. I think for me, that's like the greatest tragedy. When people have somebody, like it's an employer or maybe on a personal level, but they have somebody that's given so much and they can't see it, you know, for their own selfish reasons. To me, that's really hard for me to see, because
that's a really good response.
It's like, I know what that feels like. And I think to not be valued is just awful.
Rebecca, I relate to that on such a real level. That's a really good answer. I feel like you've made a few comments throughout this conversation about like not being seen or not being, you know, recognized to the fullest potential, and that comment there makes me think that we think very similarly. I went through a journey very similar to that, and just thinking that I was just going to always be overlooked. And God, yeah, that's a good answer. Similarly, what's your biggest fear?
Biggest fear. I do my best to fight fear on a regular basis. So, that's a really good question. I have to really think about that. But I'd say my biggest fear is that before I take my last breath or my heart stops beating, that I missed an opportunity to really help somebody and to be my best.
It's a good fear. Valid. What I was going to say is, when I was making that last comment, that last point about being overlooked, I think my biggest fear is ultimately being overlooked. Like, no matter how hard I stride, no matter how, you know, how high I go, to one day someone walk by my tombstone and just say, nobody, and just keep walking. Not that, you know, fame and recognition is something that I crave, but I think I think I seek a lot of validation because of those feelings I've had. So I think that would, not that you didn't ask, but I always ask people this question, and people might not know what my greatest fear is. So now they know, is ultimately not being recognized. My therapist knows that. Shout out. And then lastly, Rebecca, where are you 10 years from now? How's the business? How's your marriage? How are you 10 years from now? Where are you?
10 years from now, my company's larger to the point that I have employees, and I have employees in executive management that are helping me run it. And they are individuals that the world has overlooked. They are individuals that have amazing talents that the world has looked at and said, they're not really, that's not for you. Like, that level isn't for you. You really wouldn't be capable of that level. I have a dream that I want to give those people an opportunity, just like my sales team at the software company. I want to find those people that are good at different things, like my lady in New York. I'm not a social media person. I mean, if you go on Facebook or LinkedIn, I try to do, daily post but that's marketing. That's not my specialty. But I want to be able to surround myself and give people an opportunity that, like, this is your jam. Like, this is your thing. You're a rock star at it. I'm not. But I really could use it for my company. I want to be in a position where I can put them in that position, put them in senior management, and just see them rock it out and take the company to new levels, not because I need a bunch of jets or anything else, but because I want to see them succeed, and us together, we can do more good. We can inspire more people. We can educate more people to get more people out of the fear zone so they're not just frozen and can't help in emergencies and can't really tap into their talents. That's where I want to be. And on like having lost count of all the world stages I've been on, and having my husband alongside of me, you know, healthy and just vibrant, and being able to, you know, see that all coming to fruition of all these years. He's been the unsung hero in the background, in the shadows, supporting me and believing in me and being like, you can do it, you can do it. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So now, my friend, I will let you advertise.
Okay.
Go ahead and plug everything you want to plug, the business, the book, everything in between. Plug, plug, plug.
Okay, thank you so much. So with New Day Education and Motivation, for those of you that are listening, some top things is we specialize, again, in inspiring you to learn and thrive and empowering you with knowledge so that you can act in an emergency and feel confident to do so. So, you know, for those that are in the manufacturing industry, construction, roofing, all those types of industries, we do OSHA compliant CPR, first aid, stop life-threatening bleeding, bloodborne pathogens training. But then I also, from all these years of security experience, public safety, even a little software sales, all these different things, is I customize seminars for my clients based on what the training need is for them. So for instance, there was a data center in Atlanta, and they were having a hard time getting people to focus on fire drills and making it a priority. So they gave me all their standing operating procedures, all their emergency drills and their procedures. And I basically came up with a 3-hour preparedness seminar for them, where I basically came up with a different way to show why the company had these policies. And then we did some fun drills. We did a fire drill and threw a bunch of curveballs at them. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, that's why, that's really important. And that's why we do it so often. And then my roofing client, they said, you know, we really need to have fire safety training. So I customized a 4-hour seminar for them, where it's some lecture. We have a big competition in the middle where I divide them all up into teams and they compete with each other to see who can get all the information. And I have like prizes. And then at the end, they actually deploy fire extinguishers at targets, so that way, if they have to deploy it on the job site, they've actually used one.
Sure.
And I built that all for them, you know, custom. So we do that. And then on the speaking side, do keynotes. I've written a couple of keynotes that I'm ready to deliver. Again, taking that experience from leading a sales team, leading a volunteer fire department, only female. I mean, most of the people were all older than me, you know, but getting us all to point in a direction of good, taking that and doing keynotes. And then with my book, you know, that's the other big thing, New Day Inspirations, a Poetry Journey. So I have a website, newdayinspirationsbooks.com, where you can order the book and it'll be delivered. And I'm looking for anybody listening that's a bookstore or any type of book clubs to get out so I can do book signings. And again, the idea of that book is to give hope to this world that desperately needs it, from someone that has walked an interesting path. And it's that you can have hope to walk yours.
Incredible. Guys, I will make sure I throw the relevant links that she's talked about in the description of the episode, so it's really easy to access, so that you can go and order the book and take advantage of her other services that her and New Day offer. Rebecca, I am so thrilled that you did this with me. We did this in fast turnaround time too, which I thank you for your flexibility too. I mean, once I saw you on LinkedIn, I was like, man, this girl's a rock star. And I tell all my guests this, but all my questions about timelines and you know, mixing up this with that, it's all genuine, because I don't do a ton of research on my guests, because I want to learn with the listener about your journey as I'm sitting here with you. So you threw curveball after curveball at me, as God and life threw at you.
Yes.
And I just thank you for being open and being here and honest. And I wish you continued success. I can't wait to get the book for myself and read it front to back, and then give it to all the people in my life to read front and back, and tell them where to buy it, because we want to support the book, of course.
I appreciate it.
So send them the link to purchase for themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, just thank you for your time. It was an honor.
You're very welcome. And one more thing on the book.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm going to be doing is, the poetry started where I would write a card for somebody.
Sure.
So another thing is, if you order the book on the website, I won't be able to autograph it because it's coming from the publisher. But if you contact me and we set up like a book signing or something like that, then I can autograph it. And I've made myself a promise that every book that I autograph, as long as I'm living and I got it to give, every book I autograph, I'm going to be writing a personal note to that person.
That's awesome.
Just like I did with the poetry and cards to people that started this whole process.
Incredible.
So like today at that security event that I was a speaker at, I sold 4 books and I wrote every single person a customized note.
That's awesome.
Because again, I want to encourage people and inspire them. So when they're having those days, they can look back like, wow, like this person I just met and bought a book, like, look what they said about me.
Yeah.
So
that's incredible. So again, guys, I'll throw all of that stuff in the description. Like I said at the top, of course, follow on socials, subscribe on your platform of choice. And I thank you for listening in today, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.